Across Western capitals, a technological Cold War has been quietly unfolding. The United States and its European partners have launched an aggressive campaign against Chinese 5G infrastructure, treating it not just as a business concern, but as a matter of national security. The rhetoric has been sharp, the pressure relentless. Washington has spent years not only blocking Chinese telecom giants from its own borders, but actively persuading, some would say pressuring, allied nations to tear out existing equipment and shut the door on future partnerships. Germany, under mounting external influence, made headlines when it committed to dismantling Huawei's 5G infrastructure, citing security vulnerabilities. The decision was presented as necessary, unavoidable even, despite the financial toll it would bring. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Not every ally has fallen in line. At the end of October this year, American lawmakers voiced their frustration with one particular European nation, Finland. On paper, Finnish officials had publicly supported the idea of reducing reliance on Chinese technology. But in practice, the country had made almost no moves to follow through. Huawei's equipment remained embedded in Finland's telecom networks, untouched and operational. What came next was even more striking. When confronted, the Finnish government didn't back down. Instead, they made a clear statement. Finland would not follow others blindly. It would assess risks independently and make decisions based on its own national interests, not external pressure. This wasn't just diplomatic posturing. It was a direct challenge to the transatlantic consensus that had been carefully built over years. Finland, a nation deeply integrated into Western institutions, was choosing to maintain its relationship with Huawei, even if it meant friction with Brussels and Washington. So the question becomes unavoidable. Why is the West so intent on eliminating Chinese 5G networks? And what could possibly motivate Finland to stand alone, risking political capital to preserve a partnership that others have abandoned? If you're interested in stories that explore the hidden forces shaping our world, technology, economics, and geopolitics, make sure to subscribe. You'll get every new investigation we publish delivered directly to you. Now, let's dive deep into today's story. We are living through a technological turning point. The rollout of 5G networks represents more than faster internet on your smartphone. It's the backbone of a new industrial era, one where factories operate autonomously, where surgeries can be performed remotely, where entire cities become interconnected ecosystems of data and intelligence. And in this race, China didn't just participate, it surged ahead. Chinese companies, particularly Huawei, have achieved breakthroughs that have reshaped the global telecommunications landscape. While Western firms once dominated the industry, Chinese innovation caught up and in many areas overtook the competition. The numbers tell a compelling story. China's digital transformation, powered by next-generation networks, is accelerating at a pace the world has rarely seen. Today, the country has deployed over 94,000 distinct use cases for 5G technology. These aren't experimental pilot programs. They're live operational systems transforming industries. Media. 5G-enabled smart manufacturing plant in operation, mining trucks with visible 5G antennas, control room in modern hospital, shipping port with autonomous vehicles, manufacturing plants, mining operations, electrical grids, shipping ports, and healthcare facilities. More than 13,000 projects are underway under the banner of 5G plus industrial internet, integrating wireless connectivity with heavy industry to create what experts call smart factories. These facilities serve as blueprints, demonstrating to the rest of the world how digital transformation can be executed at scale. At the heart of this transformation stands Huawei. The Shenzhen-based tech giant holds more than 8,400 patents related to core 5G technologies, making it one of the most influential players in setting global standards. That's not just a corporate achievement, it's geopolitical leverage. The Global System for Mobile Communications Association, an industry body representing telecom operators worldwide, projects that by the end of this year, China will surpass 1 billion 5G connections. That's more than any other country. By 2030, they estimate that nearly 1/3 of all 5G connections on the planet will be in China. Infrastructure-wise, the scale is staggering. China has already constructed 4.08 million 5G base stations. To put that in perspective, that's 66% of the entire global deployment. Out of 5.94 million base stations worldwide, 2 out of every 3 are on Chinese soil. This dominance didn't happen by accident. It was the result of deliberate state investment, corporate ambition, and strategic foresight. But for some nations, especially the United States, China's lead is not a testament to innovation. It's a threat. The American response began in 2018, and it was anything but subtle. The U.S. government launched a multi-front campaign against Huawei, framing the company not merely as a commercial competitor, but as a potential instrument of Chinese state surveillance. The allegations were serious, that Huawei equipment could serve as a backdoor for Beijing's intelligence agencies, allowing them to intercept communications, steal intellectual property, or even sabotage critical infrastructure during a crisis. The evidence presented publicly remained vague, often classified, but the policy actions were concrete. Washington banned American companies from doing business with Huawei, effectively cutting the firm off from crucial U.S. technology suppliers, including semiconductor manufacturers. Huawei devices were blocked from government networks and discouraged in the private sector. But the United States didn't stop at its own borders. It embarked on a global lobbying effort, pressuring allies to adopt similar restrictions. The message was clear. Choosing Huawei meant choosing China, and that was incompatible with being a trusted partner of the West. Australia was the first to comply, announcing in 2018 that Huawei would be banned from participating in its 5G rollout. India, despite its complicated relationship with both Washington and Beijing, followed suit amid border tensions with China. Japan and Canada imposed varying degrees of restriction, limiting or excluding Huawei from sensitive network segments. Europe, however, was a different challenge. Unlike the Anglosphere nations with deep intelligence-sharing ties to the United States, European countries had more complex economic relationships with China. Huawei had spent years building market share across the continent, offering competitively priced, high-performance equipment that many telecom operators preferred. Still, Washington pressed hard. It coordinated efforts with roughly 20 European Union member states, including economic heavyweights like Germany, Italy, France, and the United Kingdom, urging them to phase out Chinese equipment and embrace alternatives, primarily European firms like Nokia and Ericsson, or South Korea's Samsung. Many nations acquiesced, at least rhetorically. But here's where the story becomes fascinating. One EU country quietly refused to play along. That country was Finland. In 2019, as the pressure campaign against Huawei intensified, the Finnish government publicly acknowledged that it was reviewing its telecom security policies. There was talk of potentially restricting or removing Chinese equipment from critical networks. It sounded like Finland was preparing to align with its Western partners. But years passed, and nothing happened. Fast forward to October 2024. The European Commission appointed a new Finnish official to oversee technological sovereignty, a role designed to reduce the EU's dependence on non-European technology providers, particularly from China. On his first day, this official stood before EU colleagues and declared his commitment to the mission. Europe must become less reliant on Chinese tech. It seemed like the script was finally being followed. But then came the reality check. Just days later, American politicians pointed out an inconvenient truth. Despite the official's rhetoric, Finland's actual trade relationship with China remained robust. The country had not dismantled Huawei equipment. In fact, Finland remained one of the most open European markets for Chinese 5G infrastructure. Independent research confirmed what Washington suspected. A survey conducted by European telecommunications firms revealed that 41% of Finland's telecom network equipment came from Huawei, nearly half. That wasn't a minor dependency, it was a structural reliance. Despite Brussels' concerns about technological security and geopolitical risk, Finland had given Huawei a market share that dwarfed what the company held in most other Western nations. This wasn't an oversight, it was a choice. The European Union wasn't pleased. Finnish authorities were warned, a diplomatic term for what was likely a stern conversation, and urged to align their policies with broader EU security positions. Finland's response was remarkable. Rather than offering excuses or promising gradual compliance, the government made its position explicit. Finland would not follow others blindly. It would evaluate risks independently and make decisions in its own national interest. This was essentially a polite but firm refusal, and it raises the central question of this entire saga. Why would Finland, a committed EU member and NATO ally, risk political friction to maintain a relationship with a Chinese tech company? The answer lies in economics. Finland's relationship with China extends far beyond just, 5G base stations. Over the past 2 decades, Chinese investment has flowed into Finland at levels that honestly surprise many observers. Between 2000 and 2023, Chinese companies invested approximately 14.1 billion euros directly into the Finnish economy, according to data from Merix, a Berlin-based research institute focused on China. That places Finland behind only the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and the Netherlands in terms of Chinese foreign direct investment within Europe. But the relationship runs both ways. Finnish companies have also built substantial operations in China. The Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs estimates that Finnish firms conduct business worth over 20 billion euros annually in the Chinese market. That's a significant figure for a country with a population of just 5.5 million people. What makes Finland unique is the concentration of this relationship. Roughly 8% of all foreign direct investment entering Finland comes from China. That percentage is considerably higher than the European Union average, making Finland disproportionately reliant on Chinese capital compared to its peers. This isn't just about abstract investment figures. It translates into jobs, tax revenue, research partnerships, and industrial collaboration. For Finnish policymakers, the question of whether to restrict Huawei isn't merely a technical or security issue. It's an economic calculation with real consequences. If Finland were to suddenly pivot and exclude Chinese companies from its telecom networks, Beijing would almost certainly respond. China has demonstrated repeatedly that it uses market access as a tool of statecraft. Countries that take actions Beijing perceives as hostile often face consequences: delayed business deals, canceled contracts, regulatory obstacles for their companies operating in China. And Finland has already witnessed what that looks like, not hypothetically, but in the case of one of its most iconic companies. Nokia, the Finnish telecommunications giant, once stood as a symbol of European technological prowess. For years, it competed globally alongside Sweden's Ericsson and China's Huawei for dominance in mobile network infrastructure. But when the United States launched the Open 5G Alliance, an initiative designed to promote alternatives to Chinese equipment, Nokia joined. It was a strategic decision, aligning the company with Washington's geopolitical objectives. Beijing noticed. What followed was a quiet but devastating market squeeze. In China, the world's largest 5G market, Nokia's share of communication base stations and antennas collapsed. In 2019, Nokia held 6.2% of that market. By 2023, that figure had plummeted to just 0.9%. A company spokesperson later admitted that Nokia's total share of the Chinese equipment market had fallen below 5%. The message was unmistakable: align against China, and you lose access. Nokia responded by retreating. It sold part of its equity in a joint venture with a Chinese partner. It cut nearly 2,000 jobs tied to its China operations. The company's presence in what should have been one of its most lucrative markets shrank dramatically. For Finland, Nokia's experience served as a stark lesson. If a single company's decision to join a US-led coalition could trigger such market retaliation, what would happen if the Finnish government itself imposed restrictions on Chinese firms operating within its borders? The answer seemed clear. Finland would risk not just Huawei's business, but the entire web of trade and investment that had grown between the two countries. The stakes were just too high to gamble on principle alone. To understand the full weight of Finland's decision, it helps to look at what's happening in Germany, a country that chose the opposite path. For over a decade, Huawei was deeply embedded in Germany's telecommunications infrastructure. Between 2008 and 2018 alone, Huawei's global procurement supply chain generated approximately 2.357 billion euros in economic benefits for Germany and created 28,000 jobs. By 2022, Huawei equipment accounted for a staggering 59% of Germany's 5G infrastructure market. But in July 2024, under sustained pressure from Washington, the German government announced restrictions. The plan was phased. Starting in 2026, Huawei and fellow Chinese firm ZTE would be banned from core network components. By 2029, their equipment would be completely removed. German officials called the decision unavoidable, but they also described it privately as a doomsday scenario. Why? Because the economic cost is almost incomprehensible. Analysts estimate that removing Huawei equipment could result in a GDP loss of up to $105.5 billion for Germany. That's not a typo. The disruption to industries reliant on 5G connectivity, logistics, manufacturing, energy, would ripple across the entire economy. The German railway system alone expects to lose approximately $5 billion due to network delays and replacement costs. Meanwhile, replacing existing 5G infrastructure is projected to cause network rollout delays of up to 6 years. In an era where digital competitiveness determines economic leadership, a 6-year setback could be catastrophic. The impact extends beyond Germany. According to industry estimates, Germany's decision has delayed 5G deployment across the entire European Union by 18 months and added an extra $59.6 billion in costs to the telecommunications sector continent-wide. Only 8% of telecom operators across Europe have expressed willingness to participate in the removal process, and even they estimate the cost at $4.9 billion. For Germany specifically, the direct cost of removing Huawei equipment is expected to reach $4.2 billion, with an additional $11.3 billion in indirect GDP losses as industries adjust to slower, less reliable networks during the transition. And here's the most painful part. Once the equipment is dismantled, it becomes worthless. Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of functional infrastructure reduced to scrap metal, replaced at enormous expense with alternatives that may not perform as well. Finland has been watching this unfold, and Finnish policymakers are clearly thinking, why would we repeat Germany's mistake? But there's another dimension to this story, one that looks beyond today's 5G infrastructure toward tomorrow's networks. Even as debates over 5G continue, Chinese companies have already shifted significant resources toward developing 6G technology, the next generation of wireless communication expected to become operational in the 2030s. As of now, China holds 40% of all patent applications related to 6G technologies. The United States and its allies collectively hold 35%. That gap may seem small, but in the high-stakes world of telecommunication standards, early patent dominance often translates into long-term market control. 6G is not just an incremental upgrade. It promises to enable true intelligent connectivity, seamless integration between devices, vehicles, infrastructure, and even satellites. China has already constructed a 6G field test network capable of upgrading existing 4G and 5G communication links to 6G level capabilities. This means that when 6G becomes mainstream, China could transition faster and more smoothly than nations starting from scratch. Moreover, 6G is expected to enable direct communication between ground-based networks and near-Earth satellites, creating a unified global communication grid. The military and economic implications are profound. Nations that fall behind in 6G research and development risk not just slower internet speeds, but strategic disadvantages in defense, intelligence, and industrial capacity. If the pattern of 5G restrictions continues, if Huawei and other Chinese firms are banned from participating in 6G rollouts, Western nations may find themselves technologically isolated, forced to rely on inferior or incomplete networks while China builds the infrastructure of the future. Finland seems to recognize this reality. By maintaining its relationship with Huawei now, it preserves optionality for the future. It keeps a foot in the door of what may become the dominant technological ecosystem of the 2030s and beyond. So where does this leave us? The battle over 5G is often framed as a simple question of security versus economics, but the reality is far more complex. It's about trust and verification, about national sovereignty and global interdependence, about the balance between geopolitical alignment and economic pragmatism. Finland's decision to resist pressure and maintain its partnership with Huawei is not a rejection of Western values or alliances. It's a calculated risk assessment. Finnish leaders have concluded that the economic cost of exclusion, the technological disadvantages of delay, and the geopolitical consequences of alienating China outweigh the hypothetical security risks that have never been conclusively proven in public. Germany, by contrast, chose to prioritize alignment with the United States, even at devastating economic cost. Time will tell which approach proves wiser. What's certain is that the global technology landscape is fracturing. The era of a unified, open internet and interoperable global infrastructure may be ending. In its place, we may be witnessing the emergence of parallel technological ecosystems. One led by the United States and its allies, another by China and its partners. And in that fragmented world, nations like Finland face an impossible choice. Which side of the divide do you want to be on? Or is there a way to navigate between them, maintaining relationships with both, refusing to be forced into a binary decision? These are the questions that will define not just telecommunications policy, but the shape of the 21st century itself. What do you think? Should nations prioritize security concerns and align against China's technological rise? Or is economic pragmatism and technological access the smarter path forward? To stay updated on stories like this, where technology, economics, and geopolitics collide, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll continue bringing you investigations into the forces shaping our world, one story at a time.